Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today, I've got Brittney Ball on the show with me. How you doing, Brittney?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited to have you here. For the people watching, do you want to give us a little bit of background, kind of who you are, where you work, all that good stuff?
Sure. My name is Brittney Ball. I'm currently located in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a software engineer for a company here in Charlotte called Skookum. And so what we do is digital consulting. So yeah.
Very cool. So today, we wanted to work on pulling some data into Gatsby, right? Cool. So let's dive in and do this, right? So we want to pull data from Meetup, and we specifically want to get. We had a couple goals, right? So the first thing we wanted to try was to try to pull. Can you kind of talk about what you wanted to do?
So the idea was to pull a certain ID, which was tech from Meetup, and implement it into a website. So it would be able to only showcase that ID. So it only show uh, meetups with the ID of tech.
Cool. And so is the like kind of like this page here where it's currently showing me any tech meetup. Oh, hey, Potch is
Yes.
rating. So yeah, we can look at tech. This is within 50 miles of wherever Monmouth, Oregon is. So this is kind of what you were thinking as a page like this.
Yes, exactly like
Awesome.
that.
So let's dig into the Meetup API and see what we can figure out. So here's the API, and I want to find what? We want to find like categories or something.
Yes.
Geo groups, maybe by topics. Let's just look at what everything's got. So topic categories. Oh, this could be interesting. What do we got here?
Yes, that sounds.
Topic categories. So that's a high level list. That doesn't seem like what we want. What about regular topics?
Mm,
Gives us a group count. That's probably not what we want. What about upcoming events by attendance? No, we don't care about that. I want to find events by a category. So if I want to do that, let's see. Events by ID. That was events by attendance. Upcoming events, maybe we can filter by category. Groups. Category. Hey, that's promising. Oh, Tony, I'm sorry you don't have your you don't have your sub on that account. That's too bad. All right, so we have. It looks like this is going to work, right? So this. Take a look here. Do they have a tester? Because that would be really cool.
It's a lot of information.
Wow, they send so much data back. Woofda. All right. Okay, so I don't know if that's going to do what we want, but I do know that we can just try it and find out. So I want to look first to see what the Gatsby community has already done. So let's take a look for like Gatsby Meetup. Gatsby Source Meetup, that seems right. And that is indeed a meaty API response, Potch. What? Okay, so we're going to need an API key,
Okay.
but this wants a group URL. So this looks like we might only be able to get the group, so we might have to
So,
try something else.
mm,
Oh, this is just pulling like multiples.
okay.
So I think, yeah, this looks to me like this doesn't quite do what we want, but that's okay because we can just query the Meetup API directly. So let's get on the API thing. Oh, there was a console link here this whole time. Let's log in. I think I have a Meetup account. I guess we'll find out. Find upcoming events, and we wanted to search by tech, right?
Yeah.
Self. Uh-oh. Was it self groups? No. Topic category. Portland. This is promising. So we've got events. We've got the August React meetup, Portland React JS, GraphQL PDX. That's a different meetup group.
Okay.
Does this look like what you're after?
Yeah, it looks exactly like it.
Awesome. Okay. So this is promising. So now we need to get this into Gatsby. And because we don't have a source plugin that does this, we're going to build a source plugin. Have you done anything like that before?
No, this will be completely new.
Awesome. Okay, so please ask lots of questions because there's a lot going on in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the terminal and I'm going to, how do we want to do this? Let's set up just a brand new Gatsby site from the Gatsby Hello World starter. And what that will let us do is not have to set up the basics. I don't want to have to build a package JSON or set up the git ignore, things like that. So we can maybe set this up as let's see. So we can set it up as a source plugin, or we can just build it into the Gatsby node and then we can pull it out. For the sake of being able to get started quickly, maybe we start it in the Gatsby node. So let's create a Gatsby node.js and we'll make a game plan. So step one here is we need to load the API key as a environment variable. And have you done a lot of work with environment variables?
No, this is all like really new to me, so I'm gonna be like a super beginner. So yeah.
Awesome. No, that's so perfect because it's going to keep me from assuming any knowledge. So environment variables are a way for us to share sensitive data without exposing it in like Git or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this .env.development file. Now this is specific to Gatsby, the .development, and in it
Okay.
we can do like Meetup API key, and we'll need to put the API key here. I'll have to take this off screen when I go to do this because otherwise
Other people will see it.
somebody, yeah, somebody who will be trying to be real funny, I'll go take my Meetup API key and do silly things with it. So once we have an API key, we can send a call to the Meetup API to retrieve our events. And we're going to do it by category. Once we get those events back, we need to put them into the Gatsby, like we need to create Gatsby nodes. So create Gatsby nodes using the Meetup API response. And then once we have that in there, then we can create a page to show all events, and we can create individual pages for each event. Does this all seem Did I miss any steps in what you were hoping to accomplish?
No, that's totally correct.
Awesome. So to start, we are going to, let's add yarn add .env, because we're going to need that. And this is how we're going to set up the environment variables. And so to test this, what we can do is we can say test env, and we'll set it to hello. And then in here, I'm going to require that .env, and that's just like .env is what points to this .env file. Oh, I love the elevator music sound. All right, and then I got to remember how to actually configure this. So in .env, we can pass an option to say which file we want, and we specifically want to get the config. So I want to grab the path so that we can say where we want to get that from, because we want to change the name. By default, .env is going to use .env, but we want to use .env.development. And so hey, Amberly. My goal here is to require the path, and that would be .env.development, but we only want to include whichever the one is that we're using for our current environment. So we're actually going to use a node environment variable here. And so we'll grab process.env.nodeenv. And when we run gatsby develop, that will be set to develop. When we run gatsby build, that'll be set to production. If it doesn't find a .env file, it'll just return empty. And that would be like, we'll deploy this to Netlify, so I'll be able to show how this works, but we'll go into Netlify and set environment variables there, at which point we don't need to create .env files. They'll kind of inject those into the environment for us. Does that make sense? I feel like environment variables are really confusing at first.
Yeah, it makes sense. You broke it down pretty well. I'm familiar with Netlify a little bit, so yeah.
Cool. So now that we have this, what I should be able to do is actually log that environment variable. So I can do process.env, and then we want to grab this one. So I can just copy it out and say, I want to look at the contents of process.env.testNvar. And so if I bring up my site again and I run yarn develop, it should show us here, hello. So now we have access to these environment variables, but when we're coding, we don't have to look at them. So we can send a call to the Meetup API using that API key. And when we commit our code, we won't have to share that API key in GitHub.
Awesome.
So yeah. And Antipixelated, if you're asking about the commands for redeeming sounds, the only one that we have right now is please hold, which is the one that Ecomath redeemed just a minute ago. So it would be exclamation point redeem and then please hold. I want to add more. I just haven't had time. Then, all right, so let's actually get some data in here. In Gatsby, we have a whole bunch of different APIs. And so we can look at the Gatsby node APIs to see what is available here. So we can create pages, which we'll do in a little bit. You've got options for creating GraphQL resolvers or customizing the schema. We won't get into that today. That's more of an advanced topic that's kind of out of the scope of what we're doing. You can do really advanced stuff like mess with your Babel config or your Webpack config. We are most interested in source nodes, which is going to let us add data into the Gatsby GraphQL data layer. So to do that, we can start with this example here, and we get actions and then some helpers for creating a node and creating a content digest. And down here, we create an ID and we put it in. So let's just like build a node without any data first. And that way we
Yeah.
can see how this is going to work. So we're going to get actions. We want that node ID and create content digest. And I'll talk through what each of these does when we get to it.
Okay.
So the first thing is we would create like a new node, and this will be our meetup node. And so we want our meetup nodes are going to have, let's say, this won't be entirely accurate, but we'll say they're going to have a title, and that title would be like test node, and then a description. And we'll say this is a test. And then in Gatsby, you have to set a couple required fields. So one of them is an ID, for which we use create node ID. And you can pass anything you want here. It just needs to be unique. So because this is a test node, we don't have any kind of ID. But if we look back to the Meetup API, the console that like what comes back for us is going to include IDs. So each event has an ID, and we can feed that in. So we would typically do something like node ID, but in this case, since we don't have one, we're going to say like test node test ID. So this is a required field.
Okay.
Then we also have an internal object, and this is also required by Gatsby. So this requires a type, and we can make up this name. It just needs to be unique. So we'll call it test node. And this is required by Gatsby. And we then need a content digest. And so, have you ever seen like hex, like a digest of code, like any kind of crypto stuff?
Yeah.
So what we're doing here is we're basically creating a content digest of the content of the node. And we do that so that Gatsby knows when the data has changed. So if we don't change it, then Gatsby won't do any extra work. That's to optimize performance, to allow us to cache. And the content digest is an easy way to identify like what data has actually updated. And so the way that we would typically do this is we would just pull in this data. So probably a more common way that we would do this is we would have something like this test or this node data, and we would kind of pull these in, and we would like spread node data in. And so now these fields are here, but we can use it down here with create content digest and add the node data. And so this now will only change if these two fields change, because we don't really care too much about the Gatsby only fields. So that gives us our new node. And this is also required.
So what that's doing is making sure it's updated and not,
Exactly. So every node needs a unique ID. It needs to have a type, and we needed a chance to know whether or not that node has changed since the last time that Gatsby ran. And so that's what these three required fields are for. Everything else we can make up. Any field we want to add, we can put into this node data. And that's what we'll do with the meetup stuff is we'll take those events back and just put them right in and let Gatsby do its thing. So once we have a node that we want to create, we can call actions.createNode, and we just put in our new node. So now, if we take a look at the site is running right now. And if I go to GraphQL, we have this Explorer. And over on the left, we can see by default, when no plugins are installed, Gatsby has site, site page, and site plugin as types that you can query. So these are not super useful to us right now because we're not really doing anything. So instead, we're going to try to add some data. So when I stop and restart, because we have created a new node, what we should see is test node and all test node should appear on the left when we restart. Ooh, Holy Buckets is a good command name. I like that. What would it do? Okay. So now I restart and we've got all test nodes. So let's just run a query. I'm going to do the nodes, and then we've got the title and the description, and let's get that ID that we created. And for fun, let's get that content digest and the type so we can see what Gatsby stores. So we can see over here that the title came through, the description came through, that's what we created. And then this ID that got generated is, I think it's a UUID v4, which doesn't really matter. It's just a unique string identifier that lets us know this node is correct. It's created from a starter string, which means that even if the node data changes, as long as the ID doesn't, we'll associate those nodes together. So it's important. That's why it's important to use a unique string in there. So you don't want to do like a random number, but you also don't want to make every node with the ID of like my node, because they would override each other. Then internally, this content hash is done to specifically identify like this unique content. So if I go in and change some of this data, then the unique hash, is it going to pick it up fresh? No, I got to stop and restart. So let me stop and restart. And that node data will have changed. So this hash that right now starts with 0026 will change. And so now we've got a new content digest and our new title. And we know, like Gatsby knows now, anything that was using that node needs to be refreshed. So that's the way we track things internally. And then by setting a type, we can do things like, hey, if a test node gets created, add a special field to it, or I want to load all the test nodes, or something like that. Does all that make sense so far?
Yeah, so that's how we would get tech-specific meetups.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do is we'll create like a meetup event type, and we'll be able to query like all meetup events. Probably we'll set it in the plugin config for what we're gonna query, like the category or whatever that is. But we could do that a handful of different ways. I think probably the easiest way would be through config. So yeah, I mean, I guess we could try doing it through variables or something. I don't know. We'll see how far we get and decide if we want to go deeper. So now that we have this, we can get this data from somewhere else. So now I want to load this data from Meetup. And have you done like asynchronous calls before? Do you have a favorite like fetch library or Axios or something like that?
No.
Cool.
Completely new.
I will use Axios because Axios is the one that I know. If I was a streamer, I should. Well, the thing is that I'm a grandpa at heart. And so I can't get my grandpa to do it because I think I'm actually older than he is if we were to compare internal age. All right, so let's grab Axios. So I'm going to say we're going to get Axios, and that's going to require Axios. So now we've got, and Axios, if you haven't used it before, is a way to load data from a third-party URL. So when we want to make this, let's see, npm.js Axios, it will let us make a request to somewhere else. So I can say I want to load from my API, load like the user ID, but we can also load from a third party, which I think they have an example down here somewhere. Yeah, here. So I want to load this URL, and you can pass some options, and then whatever the response is, we can do stuff with it. So specifically, I want to make this request to here. So we want to make a request to the api.meetup.com. So I'm going to make this async so we don't have to do a bunch of promises stuff. Async await is kind of a shortcut for us so that we don't have to do like if we weren't doing this, we'd have to do like Axios dot get, and then we'd have to do dot then and get the response, and that's a pain. So to get the dot then, we can do an await instead. And so now this means that whatever the content of the promise is will get returned as the result. So Potch, I have used Node Fetch, and it is great. What I haven't loved about Node Fetch is that you have to manually run like the response.json or the response dot whatever. And I do like, I appreciate the explicitness of that, but also I'm lazy. And so I really like Axios for allowing me to be very lazy. So let me get back to this Axios stuff. Let's do it this way. We're going to do Axios, and we'll say method is going to be get. The URL is going to be that. How do I send data? Here. So we can do data, and then we want to look at what our content was here. So we wanted to say, really, this is the one that we care about. We want the topic category, and we're setting it to tech. So I'll say topic category, that's tech. And I think that's all we care about. I think we're going to have to send our API key. So that's going to fail on us at first, but let's start by just seeing what we get back when we try this. So I'm going to hide all of this because we're not going to use that for a bit, but we'll come back to it. And let's just console log this response. Going to start it, and we should see like a dump of what I assume is going to be an authentication error. Yeah, so that's our 400 code, and it's not a super useful. Maybe we can catch it with a slightly better. Let's do that. That'll be a little more useful, I think. And so what I'm doing is because this does return a promise, we can use the promise.catch, and it will let us catch that error, and then we can print out just the message back. And that should be a little easier on us. Oof, response is not defined. Uh-oh. What does that mean? Oh, no, this is... Okay, so it failed. It just kind of kept going after it failed. That's okay.
Okay.
So that's what I expected. I've never even heard of GOT. I'll have to check that out. Okay, so let's add some headers. So I want to add an authorization header. And I need to figure out how to do that with the Meetup API. So let's look at their authentication stuff. Oh, I don't know that I want to do an API key or like an OAuth thing. That seems like a lot.
No. Results, not response.
Oh, thanks, Gators. That's that's me not knowing how to code. So it looks like, okay, so if we just get our key, we can pass that right in. I don't love that, but I like it more than figuring out how to set up OAuth. So I'm going to do it the bad way. I'm going to pull this off screen so that I don't share my API key. I'm going to click this API key link. Oh, okay. So they mask it so I can show here. They when you click that API key link, they're going to show you this. I need to reveal this, and then I'm going to add it as this .env. So bear with me while I make that happen. Okay, so I have it copied, and I'm going to pull this .env.development over here. I'm going to replace the API key. I'm going to close .env.development so I stop giving away all my secrets like I do every single time that I come onto a stream. And now I'm going to come back over here. So we now have, come on, cooperate. We have process.env.meetup API key. So I don't actually need this. Instead, we're going to add that here. So key is going to be process.env.meetup API key. So this, I think, should work now that I've got result, logging the result. I think this will work. And I'm going to result dot data so that it doesn't accidentally leak the API key in the request. So let's yarn develop and see what we get back.
Fingers crossed.
Cannot read property data of undefined. So it still doesn't like my request. That's no fun. Let's look at it again. So this is the data. We've got the documentation. And we were looking at events upcoming. And the request parameters, let's see what is required. I did load the env-var. Okay, give me a second. I'm going to double check that I got that name right. Meetup API key. Meetup API key. Okay. So yeah, I definitely got that right. So we should be looking at the correct API key. So that would be there. And this is always my challenge when we're doing this stuff because I don't I don't want to just share my API keys, but at the same time, it's very difficult to illustrate what's happening when you can't show it. So, all right. So just to check what we're doing a GET request. We are sending it to the API, and we're passing in a key and the topic category of tech. On the API tester, we did that, I thought. Topic category of tech. Let's just run this test one more time and take a look. So the request URL, I'm not sure what these mean, but maybe we can try them and see if they need to be included.
Fine.
Page, photo host, it's public, and sign. That one seems like it's going to be, that one seems like it's not going to work. Well, that's, yeah, I thought I needed to send it in the header, but when I looked at the, where were the docs? Meetup API. So we've got authentication. And looking at the API keys, it was server flow. No, I want to get out of this. I wanted to look at access token, authenticated requests. You can send it with that, but I wanted a API key. Is this not going to let me? API keys. Oh, okay. Required parameters for the standard request must be supplied as well as the final. So sign equals true. So that was my bad. I did not set these things. So I just set sign to true here. And now we're going to try this again and see what happens. Still failed with status 400. Why? You know what I want to do? I want to take a look at the source code of the Gatsby source meetup, because they're sending this request successfully and we can just steal ideas instead of inventing everything ourselves. Where was the request? Where are the API options? Okay, so it sends a request. How did it get the API options though? Are you key? So it's just sending the key straight across.
Mm-hmm.
Do they use auth? Can you expand on that, Ecomath? API options. Yeah, they did have an API options thing. So they are getting config options. And they stringify the API options. So the group URL name, they spread out the API options. So where are the API options? That's helpful. So everything that is not the group URL name that goes into config options is just what's being passed into the plugin itself. And so they get that, remove the plugins array, that makes sense. And then get everything that's not the group URL name, and everything that's not the group URL name appears to be key, status, but this is for the events query. So what I am curious about is if they're looking at a different API key. Now this is going to be in French, which is going to be fun. No. That's interesting that the locale didn't affect that. Key exposes the meetup groups I've joined, even private groups. Okay, so I'm wondering if maybe I can just show this API key and then revoke it so that we can try some things, because now I'm just curious what's going on, because we are sending this as a get, because it's a get request. So in events, where's the event stuff?
So would this be
It's a.
specific to only one user?
Can you say that again?
So it said that it shows the private meetups that that person joined. So would it only be specific to one user, or how would that work? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so it would basically be looking at, if I went to self events,
Mm-hmm.
self would be my particular user. The
Okay.
the find though, it does look like it's relative to where you are,
Okay.
but they let you set a longitude and a latitude. So it seems like
Mm-hmm.
what you would probably do is get for like a production version of this plugin, you'd probably let somebody look up their city or something, and then set a latitude, longitude, and radius. And so we could say like roughly in the middle of like Portland, Oregon, and then within a 20-mile radius, show me all tech meetups,
Mhm.
which would be cool. Sign as a string. That is probably smart. Although what I'm confused about, and the reason that this is confusing to me, is that when we look at this thing, there's no sign here. And when we look at the source, it never adds it. Like we don't see sign. Yeah, it never gets added. So how? How does this work? That is a good question though about this just maybe working. Let's see. Will it just work if I tell it to do it? Invalid CSRF. What if I get rid of the sign? Nope. Okay. I'm going to just try some things, and I'm gonna have to invalidate my API key. In the meantime, please don't do anything terrible, because I don't want to find out that my Meetup account was messed with. Okay, so that's my API key. Be nice. And the key is here. And that works. Okay, so Leonard, I think you're right. I think this needs to be a string. So let's try that again. No. Why don't you work? That's valid. Let's see. Topic category is tech. This should absolutely work. So let's look at the actual request here. I want to see the full result. What did I remove from the URL? I didn't remove anything. We did the photo host, topic category, page, sign, and key. And that's what we've got in here is the topic category, page, photo host, sign, and key. So I want to see
The sign. You removed it from there.
I'm going to run this. It should load the whole request thing now. And this just straight up comes undefined. No, I'm not sending a post, but I shouldn't need to send a post. This is a GET request and it works. So this is valid. Like if I take this and I get rid of the data and I send this, this should work. So let's try it. Oh, is it because GET requests don't take data? Ugh, yeah. So that's just me being bad at code. Thanks everybody for doing research to get us back on track. I appreciate that. Okay, so these instead of being data should be params. And yes, that is just me being bad at code. So let's try that one more time. And we get back code. Good. So little detour aside. Now we all know how Axios works. We can load events now as result dot, and let's check this. It's result dot data, right? Yeah. Result dot data dot events. And I think it's like dot data dot data dot events because Axios has a data thing. Or is that right? No, it's just the one. Now let's console log our events. Make sure those are coming out right. There we go. Now we've got events. So next, I do need a holy buckets. That's such a good idea. Like a really good idea. Hold on. I gotta give you points. Eco math. Right? That was your idea, right? Eco math. I'm not giving. Does that work? Did I do it right? I think I did that wrong. I'm gonna have to do that later because I don't know how these commands work. We've got our events now, which means we can loop through them because they come out as an array. And that array, right? So that's the array we can loop through and create nodes out of. So if I take the events and do a for each event, now I have my event data, and the event data that we're going to get is link, description, group, venue. Specifically, we're going to need to grab that ID. And what we can do is take our event data, but we're going to create a node, and that node is going to be the event. And then we're going to override the ID with create node ID. And we'll call this like Meetup event and use the node.id. And now this, honestly, there's no set way to do this. There's no right or wrong way. The main thing is it needs to be unique. And the reason that I add this is because that increases the chances of it being unique, because I'm adding an event, like a type name, and then an ID. So even if we get two nodes that have like this one's ID is 1 and the next one is 2, and then you've got another node type that comes in and its ID is 1 and the next one is 2, this means that they would still be different types. Then go eternal or internal, eternal. And yeah, ecomath, I did that wrong. I will figure it out, but I'm not gonna detour on that now. So I will send that over to you in a minute. Let's see. We need the type. So the type will be, oops, Meetup event, and the content digest will be create content digest, and we'll do event. So now we should have a node that does what we want, and we can actions.create node. Any questions about what we've done so far?
Not yet. Just want to see if this works. If this works, then I want you to explain why.
All right, cool. Let's do it. Okay, so it didn't like. No. Why don't you like Node? That's my fault. So what I did was I referenced this instead of referencing our event. Okay, so typos aside, now we go fingers crossed. Hey, no explosions. Okay, let's go look at GraphQL. This looks promising. Okay. So we've got like an ID. Look at all this beautiful data. We've got the name. Let's add the time. And let's do local date and local time. We can get rid of this test node because we're not doing that anymore. Let's run it. Beautiful. So this, cool. So this is very cool. And the other thing that's cool about this too is like we can filter these. So if we wanted to, we could say we only want, who knows, like
Paid
3
members or
events.
okay.
So like only free events.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is now a list of events that don't charge a cover fee, or vice versa. I don't know if any of these are going to, yeah, none of the ones here charge cover fees. So um, what else? What if we did like group name equals, is it GraphQL PDX? That might be wrong. Yeah, there it is. So now we can get only events by this particular group. So
Mm-hmm.
that is, I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff. So does that all, what should I cover? Like, what should I go deeper into with what we just did?
That is awesome. Can you explain like um, what you were doing wrong before? Can you go into more depth, like why this works now, the mistakes that were made?
Yes. So what was going wrong before is when we were using Axios, um,
Mm-hmm.
Axios can send any kind of HTTP request. And so we're specifically using a GET request. And assuming no knowledge of HTTP, when
Mm-hmm.
you type a URL in the browser, that's a GET request. You're basically saying, I would like to get this resource, please. When
Mm-hmm.
you submit a form, that is a post request. You're saying, I have some data and I'm posting it here, and you should do something and give it back. There are also like update or put or head or some other ones like that. We don't deal with those a whole lot in like front end dev. You'll typically see people are sending get and post. Occasionally you'll see a delete request or like a put request for an update or something. So what we were doing is we were using data. And so data only works with post. And
Oh, okay.
I got myself confused because what it needs to
Okay.
be is get with params.
Okay.
And so that was the error that was made. And then once we get
Okay.
here, these events, like each of these events just has all of this data. And then this is kind of where Gatsby gets really powerful, because Gatsby has the ability to do what we call inference on nodes. So we look at whatever the response is, and then we will just say, oh, you have a field called date in series pattern. We'll define in our GraphQL layer a date in series pattern that you can query against now. If we
Okay.
wanted to do something more specific, we could, we could come in and define these specifically. We could do schema customization and say, well, we want an event, but we don't want all of this meetup stuff. So we're just going to grab certain fields that we want. If we wanted to do such a thing, that's definitely possible for us. In this particular case, we don't want to be too presumptuous about what data people would need from Meetup, so we can just leave it all in.
Okay.
Do you want to build a site out of this? How are we doing on time?
Yes.
We're doing okay. We're doing okay. Let's see how far we can get. We got about about 30 minutes left.
Yes. 30 minutes. That went really by really fast.
Time flies when I'm screwing up code. Okay, so the first thing we can do is just right here in the on the index page, we can make a list. And I'm probably not going to make this very pretty, but I will make it work. So if we pull in the GraphQL helper from Gatsby, then I can export a constant called, we'll call it query, and that's going to be GraphQL, and we're just going to pull back whatever content we want. So I can come out here and let's do a query for what we want to show. So I know for sure we want the name, and we'll get the
Okay.
date and time. What else do you think we should get to show on our website?
Um, Maybe the cost. I know a lot of people probably want to know the cost if it's free. Um,
Let's
Maybe
see.
location.
I feel like that's in here somewhere. Waitlist count, visibility,
I think it was.
member pay fee. Well, maybe that's what it is. No, so we won't be able to show this one since it's we didn't have any that had a pay fee.
Mm-hmm.
Is it how to find us? Or I bet it's venue. Venue.
Oh,
Address. Maybe I'll just show the street address. I don't want to get too deep into showing things, so we'll say here's the address.
mm-hmm.
And then do we need
Description.
maybe oh yeah, description, that's a good one. Yeah, this seems like it's good, yeah. Let's see, we've got the name, date and time, whether or not they have to pay, the street
Venue.
address will oh, it looks like is this the full thing?
Yeah,
Oh, weird. A description that comes back HTML. You know what? I'm going to call that good enough. How do you feel about it?
that's perfect.
All right. So now, since we have this, we can just copy paste it straight out. And this query part is optional. It's helpful. Like you can, if you want to describe your query or something, you can put in just
Mm-hmm.
query, or you can put in query, events or something. All of those will work. When it's just a query, I tend to kind of simplify down to just this. And so now, oh, what's up, Chris? So Chris Biscardi he would not have made that Axios mistake. But yeah, this is fun. The photo, yeah, Ecomath. I'm not gonna grab the photo because I don't want to get into image processing today. So I think we'll stick with just text data for now. I totally dab in my raid, Jeff, because I am very, very bad at dancing. So I was like, what's a dance move that I can do that won't look completely ridiculous? And I was like, I can dab. Okay. So now we've got a query. Once we do this query, when Gatsby runs, it is going to pull this data out and add it to our component here as a data prop. And so inside of that, this will be the object. So it'll be data.allmeetupevent.nodes. So I want to show, I guess we want to show like a heading. It'd be like upcoming events, or we want tech events in, this is in Portland. So we'd have to update the latitude and longitude. And what would be really interesting if you were going to build a website out of this is to use like the Google Maps API to be able to say Portland, and then it would pull back the latitude and longitude for you. And then you would be able to show, like, whoever configured it would be like, I want meetups in Portland. And then you could grab that API data in the background. We could do it the same way that we got the meetup stuff, just using a different
Mm-hmm.
API, right? Like that'd be super fun.
Yeah.
So then we'll do an unordered list, and then we can say data dot all meetup event dot into cycle. Chris, I don't even know what cycle detection is. I need to have a stream just where like Chris teaches me computery things. It'll be the follow up to this stream is like learn with Jason. Instead it'll be like Chris teaches Jason all the things he doesn't know. All right. So what we're doing is we've gotten into the all meetup event and the nodes, and then we're going to get a list of our events, and it'll be these fields. So
Okay.
I'm going to create a list item, and I need to give it a key so that React doesn't have any trouble noticing which DOM is which. So with that, we'll do event.id. And then I want to add let's do an h2 for the event.name. And maybe we can let's put the date in front. So we'll do event.local date. And then we can set like the time. So event.local time. And then we can do, let's see, like cost. And I don't exactly know how this one works, so maybe we do like member pay fee equals false, and we'll say free or $1 million. But we don't have an unpaid event or a paid event, so I'm not sure if this is coming back true or if it's going to give us like a dollar amount. So I'm kind of this is just me being cheeky. This is a definite like bug. And then I think we can do set like the location, and that can be event dot. Where are we going? Venue dot address 1. And then
Yeah,
was this HTML? Was that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if that's HTML, then we can set dangerously set inner HTML. And the HTML will be, what was it? Event.description? Okay. How did I do? Does this look like it's going to work on the first try?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, let's give it a shot and see what happens. So let's go look at just the localhost 8000.
Whoa.
So this might be because we created a query and didn't stop and restart. So let's do that. Confusing.af. Oh, that should be a website. Okay, let's try this again. Oh no. Okay, so we broke something, but what? Let's try data.allmeetupevent. Let's just log it out and see what we get. Data. Okay, so now we should get in the console whatever's coming out. Let's refresh the page. And what do we see? All meetup event, nodes. I have a typo. What have I done? No. Oh, good catch. I think everybody caught that at the same time. Thank you very much. Cool. So now what? Is this going to work now? What? Okay, so it doesn't like address 1, event.venue. Oh, maybe some of them don't have a venue. So let's do a check. What about that? Hey. So that looks right.
Yes.
I mean, it's not perfect, but
cost-free. Location.
Cool.
Season link.
Now I'm like, maybe I want to go to this one. This seems fun. Yeah, this is cool. So so now we could put this up as a like, hey, here's my my local meetup group. What'll be interesting about this though is if we deployed this to Netlify right now, because we're not setting a latitude and longitude, this is going to pull up meetups within whatever the server is that builds this for Netlify. So we will need to set that latitude and longitude. How do we do that? What is the latitude of Portland? Perfect. So we could just grab those out and drop them in. And we would set those in for. Well, actually, you said are you in? You say you're in Charlotte?
Yes, Charlotte,
Okay,
North Carolina.
let's do it. Let's drop these in and get different events. So I'm gonna come in here. We'll go back into Gatsby node, and we need to set that latitude. And here's where we find out. This one is latitude. Yes? Oh boy. Do you know? I don't know.
I think you're right.
Yeah, okay. All right. This is going to be fine. Okay, longitude is 80. Okay. Yeah, latitude first. Okay, perfect. All right. So that's the latitude and the longitude is 80. I wonder how that's going to. All right, let's try it. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to stop and restart. No. Okay, so it didn't like that. Didn't give us a 404. Why did it give us a 404? Let's go back to here, and we can check it. Oops, that's a code 404. Negative 80. Okay. So the latitude and then the longitude.
Longitude negative.
Is negative 80 something. And state, North Carolina. Hey, all right. Yeah, Charlotte. Cool. Very cool. Okay, so then we can set those. So I just need to change this one to be minus 80. And then that should work. Chris, you weren't here. Ecomath had a great idea. I need a holy buckets command for when something goes right. It'll like play confetti on the screen or something. And maybe like flood the screen with the happy Jason Bear emoji. Okay, so let's look at the site again. And this is now. These are definitely different. Do these look like stuff in your area?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So I think yeah, I think this worked. Okay, how are we doing on time? Things kind of flew by here. So we could go through and build individual pages. I think we can do that in about 20 minutes. Or I'm happy to take questions if you want to look at, if you want to turn this into a plugin, we might be able to do that inside of 20 minutes. What do you think? What would be most useful for you?
Probably plugin.
Okay, let's do it.
Or yeah. Did anyone have any questions?
Yeah, if you've got questions, throw them in the chat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up as a local plugin to start. And what do you think for calling this? Because it can't be Gatsby source meetup, so it would need to be like Gatsby source meetup category? Or like nearby meetups?
Yeah, local meetups.
I like that. Local meetups. All right. And then inside of it, we're going to set up a Gatsby node.js, and we're going to transfer over a lot of this. Actually, all of this, I think. Yes. So we're going to transfer over everything and put it in here. And we can get rid of all of this because that is done now. And then what we want to figure out is, oh wait, did I miss a step? Events for each. Is that it? Yeah, that was the thing. So we're not going to use this anymore because now what we need to do is load the plugin options. And so we get those as options. And we're going to switch. So we need to figure out what our keys are going to be. So we're going to have key, or we'll call this API key to be clearer. We're going to have the category. We need to have the events. Well, how do we want to do that? Max events for this is like, I think it's returning 20 events. I don't know what this photo host means. I'm going to try just deleting it and see what happens. Does it break? Because if it doesn't, I'm just going to leave it out because we're not using it. Okay, it still works without it, so I'm going to leave this one out so that we don't have extra configured stuff. And then we need latitude and longitude. And that's what's going to come out of options. So what this means is that we need to pass those in when we install this plugin. We can set some defaults, I think. So we'll set this to 20. Latitude and we could set defaults for latitude and longitude, but I'm wondering if that's maybe let's just leave that. Let's just leave that. And so then what we can do is let's set up our package.json, and I'm going to use a shortcut for this because I don't like typing out manually. So I'm going to go into the plugins and this Gatsby source local meetups, and we're going to yarn init -y. And what that gives us is a package JSON that has all the pieces included. And then we got to make sure that we've included our dependencies. So we're not going to use .env because that's going to actually be used in the site that installs the plugin. But we are going to use Axios. So let's install that. And that'll show up in our package lock. Good. So then I think I'm going to change this to be Gatsby node. So in a package lock or a package.json, the main is what node uses to decide whether or not a package is valid. And so we could, like by default, it'll say index.js. We could create an index.js and put something empty in there. In this case, though, like because we're shipping a Gatsby node, we know that a Gatsby node is required, so we can say that's the main, and that prevents us from having like empty files. Let's see. Did any questions? Tony, you smartass. Yes, Chris will answer all the questions. So now that we have this, we can install it. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to go into our Gatsby config and let's add it as a plugin. So we want to resolve it as and then we need to pass in our options. And so the options that we grabbed out are all of these. So let's take each of these and make them into a thing. All right, and so I'm just going to hit Command D here to get each instance, and we'll make them into strings. So this one now is going to use the .env. So I'm going to pull that out and put it in here because now I want that to be pulled out of the site, which is where we are here. And then I can pass in the process.env.meetup API key. So that'll come through. Then the category we wanted to be tech. Max events, I'm going to leave that out. We'll just go with the default.
Okay.
And the latitude and longitude, we're going to pull out of here. So latitude here and longitude here. And so now when this runs, this plugin should be triggered. And so we'll be able to use these. Let's do the API key, category, max events. We'll leave that sign true as is because it looks like that never changes. Pass in the latitude and the I can't spell it, longitude. Okay. So, assuming I did all that correctly, we can even, I'll just leave it empty. We now have an empty site Gatsby node, and we have the plugin configured with our API keys and the various settings. So this plugin should theoretically be good to go.
Perfect.
Should we let it rip?
Yes.
The site does have .env installed because we set up Axios and .env on the site when we were setting everything else up. So the plugins have changed. That's good. It ran without errors, which means that the query should have worked. And so when we go back out to localhost, boom, we did it.
Yay! Success.
So now what we can do is we can let's publish this. Let's get this out into the world, right? So let's go to the plugins and the Gatsby source local meetups, and we can get init. And so now if we do a git status, we'll see all of this stuff. So I need to pull in the git ignore because we don't want any of the yarn lock or the node modules. So now that we've added that, we're going to do git status again. And so now it only includes git ignore, Gatsby node, package, and the yarn lock we actually do want. I don't know why I said we didn't want that. And so that should give us a functional component. Let's document it real quick. So we'll set up a readme.md and go Gatsby source local meetups. And let's see, pulls data about upcoming events in a given category for a specific area. And then we'll say options, or I guess I'm just going to put an example. I'll add more later. We'll do in your Gatsby config, and then we can just grab that Gatsby config straight out. So where was it? And we won't make assumptions that people are going to have to use that, so we'll just put in
API.
And where was it? The API key. It was here. So we can tell them to get it there. Category, latitude, longitude, and what was that last option? We called it like items per page, events per page, max events. Optional Default is 20. So now this is not great documentation, but it'll get somebody started.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and git commit this thing. So we've got our git status. Let's git add all, and we'll git commit initial working plugin. And we are going to make sure that you get credit for doing this. So let's do git co-authored commit. Let's do we're going to do this. So we'll set co-authored by, and then do you know your GitHub email off the top of your head? Are you comfortable sharing that?
Yeah. Yeah. Brittney, Brittney .ball BALL 07 at Gmail.
07?
Yes, at Gmail.
Gmail.com.
No
Cool.
spam,
All right.
please.
No spam, please. Yeah. All right. So let's create. This is using the hub tools. So I'm going to git create. And now I'm going to git push, set the upstream to origin master. Now we can git browse. That's going to take us to GitHub. And here's the two of us. So we've got ourselves a working plugin. We've got a basic example. And let's publish this thing. Or we're going to do, what's our version right now? We set the version to 1.0. Let's publish 1.0. npm publish. And I think this is just going to work. Let's go check it out. npm JS. All right. How cool is that? So yeah, we were able to build that plugin, and so now we can let's see. Do we have time? We got 7 minutes. Let's do this. I'm going to take this local plugin out actually, and I'm going to do that in the file system so that I don't break everything. So let me pull this over. Where's my file stuff? Here. All right, so here's the thing that we did today, the Meetup API, and we've got our plugins here. So I'm actually just going to pull this directly out into my dev folder. And then I'm going to delete this plugins folder. Why can I not find the button? Move to trash? What am I doing? I don't know why I couldn't, my eyes weren't working. So now that we've got this set, we can do a, where are we? Learn with Jason, meetup. Okay. And we're going to yarn add Gatsby source local meetups. Okay, so we've installed it. Let's look at our package.json. Gatsby source local meetups. That worked the way we wanted it to. So let's go back in. We're going to check this one more time. All right, just to make extra super duper sure, I'm going to run Gatsby clean and delete all the things that are in here. Did you successfully delete it? Looks like you froze up on me. Come on now. Where you at? Did it do it? Node source. Yeah, deleted it. Okay. Let's run it again. Yarn develop. And if we go back to our local browser, it works. So we were able to we built a source plugin. So we got into the Meetup API. We sourced some data. I struggled with Axios. Everybody bailed me out. But yeah, we got ourselves a plugin built. Anything that you want to dig into here?
Holy buckets! Is that what that's what everyone says?
Holy buckets, indeed. Well, Brittney, thank you so much for coming on. This was super fun to dig into and kind of go over some stuff that we've never covered this before. How
Thank you
would
for
you?
me.
Yeah. How can
You're
people get in touch with you?
well, people can follow me on Twitter. I'm at underscore Bree underscore Tony. So Bree Tony is like Brittney, but pronouncing it kind of weird. But and that's the same thing for Instagram also. So and Facebook, it's just my
Oh,
name, Brittney. So
I
Bree
don't know that I've
Tony.
ever. I stopped using Instagram a while ago because I couldn't figure it out. And I think you are the first guest I've had who suggested following on Instagram. So, yeah, go Ecomath. Don't you do anything with Brittany's email? I'll come for you. So,
Don't spam me.
but yeah, all right, y'all. I'm so happy you came on today. Thank you so much for being here. We have another stream planned tomorrow morning at what time? Let's see. It's going to be at 9 a.m. Pacific, I believe. So there's Brittany. Tomorrow I have Curtis Kemple, where he's going to come on. We're going to look at serverless GraphQL functions. That's going to be a riot. I love Kurt. We always have a good time. So please tune in for that one. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to build like serverless GraphQL stuff is super cool, and the work that AWS is doing in this space makes it really really easy. So yeah, please come on, and we'll see you tomorrow. Brittany, thanks again.
Thank you so much.
All
Bye,
right, we'll see
guys.
y'all tomorrow. Bye.